Hello, welcome to Dorcas Fashion Academy. Today we're going to make a sewing machine undermat organizer with a little pocket that falls over your desk. What you will need is 60 by 60 centimeters of wadding, 60 by 60 of lining and outer fabric, 2 meters 65 of bound edge, bias binding, or something that you can cut on the bias of another contrast fabric. The same for your pocket, a strip of 60 centimeters by 20 centimeters, the same 20 by 60, 20 by 60, and another edging 60 centimeters. Now let's get cracking. Okay, so before we start, I've got to explain something about the bound edge. This is a piece of fabric of 8 centimeters wide that we've cut on the bias. As you can see, the little checks are going sideways. We've cut them on a true bias. So you're not going to have enough with the width of a fabric, even if it's 150 wide. This one in particular was 112 wide. So what we need to do is join the pieces. And we're going to join the two edges at about 1 centimeter from the edge. Afterwards we'll trim, and where the points kind of overlap in the center is where we're going to machine from the center join or the overlap to the other center join. And this way we can have 2 meters 65 of the edging, because otherwise it's never going to be wide enough. So if we machine this, this is what we're going to have in the end. We'll trim off these little corners that come out, and then we can have a long 2 meters 65 strip. So once you do that, we can get started with our undermat. Right, so I've sewn my binding, and I've pressed the seams open, as you can see here, and then I've also pressed them as they were before. And what I'm going to do is just trim these little bits extra, and now I have a long strip of binding of 2 meters 65 plus my small piece, which is 60 centimeters, is going to be used for the pockets. So now we can start putting our batting together with our fabric. Okay, we're going to put our mat together, and I'm going to use this one as the bottom fabric, the lining, and this one as the top, because I do have a lovely fabric contrast that is going to be our pocket. So I thought this was quite busy. So this is going to be the lining, and this is going to be the top fabric, and this one is going to be the pocket. So this one goes on the underneath of the wadding. I'm going to place it underneath. It's been cut at 60 by 60, and I'm placing my wadding on top because we're going to pad it all the way around. It's just about cut the same. Make sure that we don't have any creases below. And then what I've done with my outer fabric, I've actually pressed it, folding it in half and half again. So I have these nicely marked, very exact squares. And this is going to be my guide when I do the quilting, because this manner I don't have to draw anything on my fabric, and it's a really good, easy way to match up our lines. So I will be pinning in between the squares so that it doesn't interrupt me in the sewing. And I will first do the center one, and then I work outwards. In case there's any crease doing the center one, you find that you can just shift it to the sides. And once we do the vertical ones, we're going to do the horizontal lines. So I'll start here, and then I turn it around I start from the center outwards as well. I will be putting my sewing machine on a longer stitch, and I'm not using a walking foot or anything. It's not such a big piece, and I'm just going to sew straight down. So I'm going to start sewing, and because it's a bit bulky, I'm just going to fold or roll the couple of squares until I get to the center. This way I have less fabric going in through the sewing machine. I will do a reverse at the beginning and at the end, as usual, and then just continue down. Okay, this is my first stitch done, and as you can see it's fairly straight because I followed my ironing lines, but you have to have a bit of patience, okay? So don't fret, just take it easy and just carry on doing your stitching. Now on this side, instead of starting it from the top, I'm just going to turn it around. This way I don't have all the fabric inside the sewing machine. So my vertical lines are done, and I'm going to start with my horizontals in the same manner, starting from the center outwards. Right, so I've already done my quilting, and I've neatened the edges, I've tidied up everything, cut all the threads, and as you can see you get kind of the same effect on the bottom side. Obviously I've made sure that I didn't have any creases before I started sewing because it would look a bit odd. But at this point you can actually choose if you prefer to use the contrast fabric or this one. I've chosen this one because it's a bit lighter and I prefer it. So once this one is done, we're going to put together our pocket. Again, I'm using this pattern for the bottom. I've got my wadding here, which we're going to insert in between. And this one, I've done it in the same manner as I did before. I pressed it. This time I've pressed once and twice. We're going to only have horizontal lines. And this is my guide for my sewing, my quilting. So I'm only going to do 3. And then afterwards we're going to bind the top edge and attach it to our mat. I'm going to pin here with a couple of pins, and I will start in the center like before. Center and then the both sides. Right, so now I'll trim and neaten and prepare for the binding. So I've done the 3 lines and I've trimmed all the little extras and the threads that were lying around. And now this edging is going to be sewn on the wrong side in this manner. We're going to sew it at the width of the presser foot, or just slightly less than a centimeter, and then we're going to turn it towards the right side and top stitch. In this manner we are sure to catch the edge of the binding. Sometimes it's quite difficult when you use the bias binding that you do the stitch on top because it looks nice, but then you don't catch the bottom. That's really the wrong way to do it. The right way is to sew it on the wrong side of your fabric, or like in this case the bottom side, and then afterwards we'll take it over and top stitch on the right side. So I'm going to sew this just in a minute, and we're ready to roll. Okay. We made it wider because we felt that instead of 8, 6 centimeters was too narrow, to bring it over and have a nice comfortable binding. Okay, so I have already sewn my edge, and now we have to turn it towards the right side. It is very important here that you pin very carefully and make sure that the whole binding is secured with pins, and that it all measures the same all along the top. Because if you're not careful, you're going to get really big wiggles and they actually look horrendous. So pin with quite a few pins. Don't worry about putting too many pins, at least not in this case. In other moments you can put few pins, but this one you need to pin, or you can actually tack. If you're not confident with the pins, you can tack. I'm putting pins, but I'm putting more than my usual, so that I can see that it's all nice and straight. It's happened to me before that I'm in a bit of a rush, and I put few pins, and then I have to unpick anyway. So it might be better to take a bit more time pinning nicely, making sure that everything is in the correct place, than later unpicking. Right. I'm having a good look at it to see if it looks even. And then slowly I'm going to top stitch along the inner edge. So let's see how this goes. Right, so it's not too bad. It's a bit thick and bulky, but it's not that important. I'm going to give it a little bit of a press and cut the ends of the excess binding, and then we're going to put it on top of our quilted mat. So we're ready now to attach our pocket. What I did is I gave it a little bit of a press here. It looks so much nicer. And I'm going to try and center it as best as possible. And I'm going to pin on the sides so that we're going to create our pockets. Our pockets meaning that this bit is going to come to the edge of the table. And what we're going to do lines in the same manner. We've done the quilting, but this time it's going to create pockets. And really you can decide whatever pockets you would like to make. I thought that I would divide it into 3. Remember, this bit is quite thick and bulky. Now we've got 2 layers of wadding and 4 layers of fabric. So it gets a little bit thick and bulky. I think I have to raise it a little bit here. So just watch out. Although it doesn't have to be 100% perfect. It's a quilted mat. So the important thing here is that we get all the layers together. I had thought of creating 3 pockets. So I'm going to sew in the middle of these 2 stitchings, more or less there. And then I'm going to make one closer to the edge, and that's going to be for my scissors, so that I can insert them kind of there. I'm going to sew in the same manner as did before, but this time I'm going to do a reverse at the beginning to secure these 2 bits of pockets. One done. You see now, it's going to create my pocket. Once I do this one, I'll have 3 bits in which to insert my stuff. So once we do the edging here, we're going to have a pocket here, a pocket here, and a pocket here. And well, this one's going to be the narrower one. I'm just going to take this and kind of do it in half, and I'll stitch this one in the same manner. What I am going to do at the same time is sew this and trim this bit off that is extra, so that everything is square and ready for our binding. So we have our pocket done. As said, I sewed the sides, but I also stitched the bottom, so it would be easier for me to put on the binding. Now we would start at the top, but as we did the pocket in the same manner, we are going to sew it on the wrong side. So leaving a little bit extra from the center, I'm going to start sewing at about 7 or 8 centimeters from the center. So this gives me extra for later, so that I can join these 2 pieces together. And although you must be wondering how these corners are going to be done, because they could be quite daunting, it's really simple. I tell you, it's really simple. So first of all, not be scared. You can put a couple of pins. This doesn't have to be as perfect as when you fold it over and do your top stitch. So we're going to sew. I'm going to start with the reverse here, and we're going to actually sew to the end of your fabric here. And I'm going to do this and show you that it's not that difficult, and we're going to get really nice corners. I'll sew this bit. So I have sewn to the edge of my fabric, just there, and finish with the reverse. And now, what we're going to do, we're going to hold it upwards, like an inverse L shape at an angle, a diagonal. And then, on the sewing line, you're going to fold it down again. And believe it or not, this creates a really nice corner. I'm going to just sew up to here so I can show you the corner, and that you can be confident to do all the 4 corners without being worried. So we just sew over just about the width of the presser foot, or a centimeter. So now is the magic. We would be taking this towards the other side, and already we are creating a kind of angled corner there. So if you pushed one this way and push the other one towards itself, look, we have a fantastic corner one on either side. So do not worry at all. All it is, finish, sew, you do the diagonal upwards and then you push it to the side. This is it, and then sew down. I'm going to carry doing all the four corners until I come to the end. Right, so I've sewn my binding and I've done my corners with the way I showed you. It's really easy, so don't fret over it. Now, I'm going to close this, and there's many ways that you can do it. You can actually do it with a diagonal like we did before, but here is a bit more complicated. I'm just going to sew them at 1 centimeter together. If you can't, you can just fold one inside the other. I'm going to show you how you'd fold one inside the other. I've left a bit extra, so you could just put one like this, and that, and just sew across. I don't really want to do that. I prefer to sew them at 1 centimeter. So I'm going to find in the center, which is more or less where I've sewn my stitching before. I'm going to leave 1 centimeter extra. And then I'm going to do the same on the other side, pinning where the seam is and leaving 1 centimeter on the other side. So now we know that both pieces should have 1 centimeter extra on either side. So if I open up the binding and put the two folds, center folds that we have together, I would machine this at 1 centimeter, open the seam and sew over, and it should fit. So I'm going to sew this bit now and see what it looks like. It's a bit awkward because you have the whole quilted mat with you to sew such a tiny piece, but so that I can show you. Okay. So here we are. If I opened this seam, and pressed it down, which I'm going to do in a minute once I do the stitch. Oops. Right, as you can see, it's lying flat and in the center of my mat. It's gone a bit wavy here, and this is only normal because the fabric is on the bias. And once you pull it to manipulate it, it can happen. But once I top stitch and I press, this is going to be fine and back to where it was before. So I'm going to sew across and get it ready to be turned over. So you see, it looks quite neat. Right, so I'm going to press the edging a little bit so that it's easier for me to pin. And I'm going to pin it in the same manner as before, just making sure that the width of the edging is more or less the same all the way around. And then I'll top stitch. Well, I have pinned all the way around after pressing and making sure I'm creating my corners. The top bit is slightly wider than the bottom bit, but it doesn't matter. And you have to make sure that you're careful around here, because here we've got double the wadding and double the fabric. So it might get a bit bumpy. So I'm going to start sewing, and basically after that my mat is finished. Right. So the binding is sewn. I'm going to remove the pins and press the edges, and that's it. I'm good to go.
Well, this is it. This is our sewing machine Undermat organizer. I hope that you've enjoyed this video and you would like to make this organizer yourselves. I really love it and find it really useful. Well, if you've liked this video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and give us a big like. Happy sewing!